Hey, FFR listeners. If you love getting to listen in on our convos each week, consider helping us keep bringing our signature brand of feminist pop culture analysis to you by joining our Patreon community at patreon.com/femfreak. You can get early access, exclusive bonus episodes, participate in AMAs, join our friendly Discord server, and more. That's patreon.com/femfreak. See you there.
It's not even subtle, right? Like, that's why I get really frustrated that these films, like, they get so much money. I wish there was a little more subtlety and nuance and grace to the storytelling of it. Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Anita Sarkeesian, and today I'm joined by someone who has an even smaller cameo in Ad Astra than Natasha Lyonne, Carolyn Pettit.
Hey! Blink and you miss me, but I'm in the movie, I swear. I'm not in the movie.
I think that's a lie.
Yeah, I'm not in the movie.
This week we're going to be talking about, as you probably guessed, the new sci-fi film Ad Astra. And because of that, we have a very special guest this week, Trace Dominguez.
Hello.
Trace makes YouTube videos that explore all sorts of fascinating scientific facts, ideas, questions, data.
Yeah.
Hi, Trace.
Thanks. That's a good list. That seems like a good list. Hi.
It seems like an accurate list. And then occasionally you make videos about Downton Abbey.
Yeah, occasionally I do other weird stuff. I did that one time. Yeah. That does make it occasional, though, I guess.
Does doing it once make it occasional?
Depends on your data set.
Sure. Cool. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Yeah. All right. How are you doing, Carol?
Yeah, doing good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Cool. This is a great intro to the podcast.
Well, no, I want to, I took a quick look at Trace's YouTube channel, and, I want to tell viewers that it's super interesting. Like, the range of scientific stuff that you engage with is really cool. Like, you have stuff about, like, the Large Hadron Collider, but also, like, I don't know, like DNA tests, and I mean, just all sorts of science-related questions and stuff. So, I encourage folks to check it out. Right? It is youtube.com/Trace Dominguez. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yes, I think I was pretty sure I had that right, but I wanted to think. Okay, great.
Yeah, cool. if you Google me, there aren't too many Traces out there. There are a few of us on the internet.
There are. I encountered a Trace the other day. I don't remember if it was fictional or not, but still.
Yeah, there are a few of us around. But yeah, thanks for that praise. I feel like that's super accurate. Like, I try and cover things that are, I don't know. I basically just follow my own curiosity threads. So it's like, I'll think about something, and the next thing you know, I'll be like, I'm going to make this into a video.
So you don't have like super tight boundaries about what you talk about, more just like science-y, Y&C.
Ooh, science-y, Y&C.
Like timey-wimey.
Yeah.
The general parameters of like, you know, this interesting fact, let's talk about it.
Yeah, I'm a researcher. So if I have a question that I can't answer, I'll start digging into it, and that'll probably end up being a video. So the most recent one is about cool sculpting, which is like kind of a cosmetic, non-invasive surgical procedure, which is really interesting. And then like Carol said, I've also talked about particle physics. So it's like, it is quite the breadth.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, I'm excited to have you on to talk about this very scientifically accurate film.
So weird.
Ad Astra. All right, let's actually get into it so we can rip it apart. What? Spoilers.
All right, y'all. In the near future sci-fi film Ad Astra, the Earth is devastated by a series of mysterious power surges. Spacecom, the NASA-like space agency of the film, informs astronaut Roy McBride that the surges are originating from the Lima Project, an expedition that left for Neptune many years earlier, and which was commandeered by Roy's father. Roy, played by Brad Pitt, embarks on an expedition of his own to Mars in an effort to send a signal to his father and bring the power surges to an end. Dad Astra, am I right? Dad Astra?
Dad Astra.
Wow. They could have just called this Brad Pitt the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
what did everyone think of it?
Well,
I thought it was pretty. Like, I actually enjoy, like, okay, well, so hold on. When Carolyn, I think I proposed us talking about it because I knew you'd be around in space science stuff.
Yeah.
And Carolyn was like, it's supposed to be boring, so I'm probably gonna like it, was her response to that. And I felt like I get why people are saying that, because it is like, it is a calm film in a lot of ways, right? There's a lot of space in it, but not in the way that like longtime listeners of the podcast would call like a Carolyn film, because I wasn't bored throughout it for the most part. It moved along. It just was sort of calm, as opposed to like the shit that Carolyn likes. That's the like long people being in love for 5 hours movies.
So yeah, like what I think what's interesting about Ad Astra is that it's a really, really simple, and I don't mean this in a negative way at all. Like, to me, I actually like this about it, but it's a very simple story. Like, it is at heart, it's like a fable in a way, right? And I mean, it's interesting that you're here with us on this episode, Trace, because like, because I don't, I didn't, watching this film, even though it has like, some science elements in it, I felt like this is more one of those movies that uses space as like a canvas for like mythological kind of explorations. It's not like a hard science. It's not like The Martian or something like a hard science film. It is like a story about a son and a father and a journey and forgiveness and personal growth and like, those kinds of things. So I guess for like one thing I'll say off the bat is I think Brad Pitt is actually really good in this film, because I think
disagree.
Okay, well, let me say why I think he's good. Let me say why I think he's good first. Because so Roy is Roy's deal for most of the film, I think, is that he has like too much control almost of his emotions. Like the world that he lives in as a character values that, right? The people in Spacecom are like, wow, your heartbeat has never gone above 85 BPM, even during the fall from the space antenna. And he says things like, yeah, it's, do you have a family? Well, no, it's dangerous work. It'd be a shame to let anyone share that risk with you or whatever. Like, he's very detached, but I felt like I saw in Brad Pitt this subtlety of like a man who has learned to detach himself from his own emotions as like a skill. And I think the movie is largely about what the cost of that is and him like learning. Obviously, it's about him learning to get back in touch with his ability to connect to himself and thus to other people. But anyway,
I totally agree with that. Yeah. I think it seems like the movie was set in this weird near future environment where it was like everything was so controlled and like personal data had been taken to a level where he was doing a psych eval over and over again throughout the narrative. And the psych eval would sometimes come back instantly as like, oh, you're cool, you're good to go. But then there were a couple of times where it, spoiler obviously, didn't. But he seemed like he was super detached at the beginning, and then by the end he was super emotional. It was a little weird in that aspect, but I thought the movie was interesting. But I like what you said about space as kind of a canvas. I felt the same way. I think this was a movie set in space that plays out the same kind of tropes that we see in a lot of other films, where like Brad Pitt had daddy issues. His dad was not around when he was younger, and now he has a chance to confront his dad. And when he doesn't go as well as he was hoping,
I think so. I thought it was really I was actually engaged for the whole film. Like, I didn't really check out in any particular parts, even though I was rolling my eyes a lot at it. Right? Like it still kept me, and I was still interested in what was happening. I loved the visuals. I hated the voiceover. I hated it. Like, it was
it
so
was terrible.
So that's when I say that I don't think Brad Pitt did well in this, is because those voiceovers were fucking brutal. Like, they were bad. They were unnecessary. It was like exposition, the fucking movie. What I would have liked to see is allowing the audience to let the actor express emotions physically through facial expressions, through mannerisms, where we can like infer things as opposed to like, I feel this way.
Yeah.
This is how I feel. Are you sure? Do you know that I feel this way? I think that the parts that could have replaced the voiceovers were things like the psyche evals, where, you know, he was sort of revealing in a little bit to get through the evaluation, but didn't have to reveal that much. Like that would have been such a much more interesting way of like revealing little bits of the character's psyche and past experiences and that sort of thing, instead of having voiceovers for the whole goddamn movie.
I got so sick of the voiceover. At first I was like, oh, interesting story like mechanism that they're using here at the beginning of the movie to really set everything up. And then halfway through, I'm like, shit, are we still on the voiceover train? Because like it just, and then by the end of the movie, I was just like, my God, why did we even watch the movie? This is a podcast. Like we could have just listened to this whole damn movie.
It could have been a space opera or something, like an audio story. Like it just, that ruined, like completely ruined the movie for me. I was engaged with it to some degree, but like we've talked about before, it can be hard when you're asked to care about the interior lives of like white dudes over and over and over again. And this movie was that, right? So,
oh my God, yeah.
And we've talked about that in terms of the movies that resonate with us on this podcast a little bit in terms of like caring about or not caring about things, whether a movie was good or not and how we resonated with it. And so to me, it was just like the things that they were struggling with were these human issues, right? Of like, loneliness and loss and grief and trauma and isolation and control. But it felt so contrived. Like every explanation about how they were feeling, everything about like why they were doing what they were doing. Like it didn't feel original. It didn't feel fresh. It didn't feel like an interesting new take on like these, you know, the 5 stories that we tell over and over again. It just, ultimately I didn't really care about the interiority of these characters, and part of it was because they gave us too fucking much, so there wasn't anything to invest into to some degree.
I definitely feel that that this is unfortunately an example of like almost always when films want to work on that kind of mythic level of like exploring universal issues. The surrogate for all of us is a white man, right? And this film definitely, unfortunately, is just another in that incredibly long line of films. And part of a kind of side effect of that is because this is a film about a man who is detached and disconnected. You have Liv Tyler as the stand-in for as like the woman with whom he's had a relationship, but she's a ghost in the movie. Like she has such little screen time and gets so little development. And it's like, on one hand, that makes sense because she's a ghost in his life, or he's a ghost in her life, perhaps more accurately, because he's so detached, he's so insulated. And so it's like, I'm conflicted because I feel like in terms of this film, like if we were just taking this film individually and this film existed in a vacuum, or if this film existed in an ecosystem with all kinds of other films that center women and people of color and like everyone, you know, more widely, it may not be an issue. But it's like, but because we live in an entertainment ecosystem that's still overwhelmingly, you know, does focus on and center white men, and where, you know, the only roles that so many women above like 35 can get are these like minuscule supporting roles, you know, in the stories about men. I mean, it's deeply frustrating. It's like, because I liked this movie, I don't have a problem with this movie existing on its own terms, but I wish that it weren't like so close to the default template for this type of film, and that it were offset by, you know, so many other kinds of stories and stories that centered so many other kinds of people.
I think also the film though is really basic. I think that that's part of my problem with it as well,
Very
right?
linear, simple story.
It's linear, but it's also so he becomes his father. He's worried about becoming his father, and he literally becomes his father when he murders everyone on the ship that he commandeers, right? Like in that moment, it's not even subtle, right? Like that's why I get really frustrated that these films, like they get so much money and like they have, this film was like cameos of like everyone in Hollywood was in this for like a second. Yeah. When I'm like, I wish there was a little more subtlety and nuance and grace to the storytelling.
To me, this film is an example of very simple, stripped down storytelling. Like to me, it is a film that is all about going to like absolute basics in a narrative sense. Like,
I think that there's a difference between simple and basic, which I don't think or simple, which I would not use as a derogatory term, but basic I am using as a derogatory term.
Sure.
And I think there's a difference between like being tropey and being obvious with things and being like there's a difference between the simplicity of sharing and expressing emotion and displaying that versus like, cool, we've seen this fucking 5 million times and it's just pretty this time.
Yeah. That's how I felt about it when I watched it, is like, I've seen this story before. I like that you brought up The Martian earlier, because I thought the interesting thing about The Martian, even though we were following a white dude, was that the commander of that mission was then like this, like a strong woman, and she had a pretty big role in her like rebelling against Earth and turning around the ship and like going back to get him and all of these other different parts where she had this like power. If you think about the characters in this film, there are probably 15 people on screen. Maybe 12 of them have speaking roles. Liv Tyler only speaks in recordings once.
But that's what I guess, like, to me, like, this is all exactly what I'm saying, is that this is like, it knows that it is about a single figure's like internal journey, and it wants to struggle, and it wants to make that, it wants that to be universal. Like when I watched, I guess since I saw this film, I've been thinking a lot about concepts and principles and things that I've thought about or talked about or learned in therapy, right? Like like a lot of people, I certainly have a lot of issues with my father. Like, my father was a man who was very complex, distant. He caused a lot of harm to a lot of people, including me, and wasn't a good model for anything, really. And, I mean, in therapy, like, I've done stuff like sort of imagined revisiting my father and like forgiving him, right? And like understanding that he had his own shit that he was dealing with, and that he did the best he could under the fucked up circumstances of his own life in a lot of ways, and these kinds of things. And so I guess I just felt like and again, like, obviously that's my individual experience. That's not a universal experience. But I did feel like, I guess I felt like if this film had it focused on one character, it may not have worked for you. It may not be in your mind like something that makes this film stronger. But I felt like it was a very deliberate choice for this film to be like, this Roy McBride, the Brad Pitt character, is like his journey is what matters. And really his internal emotional journey is what matters. It is what this film is about. Whereas, The Martian, wonderful, certainly in my mind, a better film than this. But like also a film with very different kinds of goals. Like, it's more hard science. It's more of like a thriller. It's more suspense. It's more excitement. Whereas this is trying to be this kind of symbolic, again, like this kind of work. It's kind of trying to work on this like poetic or mythic level. And for me, it did. Like, for me, it did. And I get that it doesn't for everyone. And of course, that's fine. But it worked for me.
I was thinking about Gravity in comparison to
sure, that's a much more apt comparison. Yeah,
because it was a similar kind of narrative of rebirth.
Yes.
That was like the gravity narrative, right? She went in one way and came out a completely different person. This was sort of a ham-handed version of that kind of same narrative structure where it's like he started and you know who he is and then you follow him and he comes out being a different person who's grown. And it's like, cool, but like he kind of did all his growing in the third act in about 10 minutes in 1 or 2 scenes, as opposed to like she changed slowly over time based on her hardship. And it was like really... I thought Gravity was much more stressful than this movie.
Oh, definitely.
But this movie should have been like was designed to stress us out. Like the low ceilings, the like it was beautifully made. Like Mars, all those scenes were warm. Like when they got to Neptune, everything was very dim and cool. Like they did a really good job with kind of the artfulness of it. And it was designed to make you stressed. But it didn't succeed for at least for me as well as Gravity did.
Yeah, and I really liked Gravity a lot. And I think some of that, like, what to the point you're making is that I like that his dad was kind of a dick when we meet him, right? That it wasn't like this beautiful, wonderful, yes, I'm coming home with you kind of thing. But I mean, because it needed some complexity, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Needed a little bit.
And
the movie,
real quick on that, that was. I'm not gonna side. Real quick on that, like that was very important to me because you can't save those people in your life that cause all that damage, or it's not your responsibility to do that,
right?
So
but like,
wait,
but what you're saying, Trace, is that all of the character development happened when he was like, "Cool, I got closure now."
Yeah,
my dad's a dick. Like, I knew he was a dick, but I didn't really know because the whole world says that. So I've been gaslit by this corporation and the whole world telling me that my dad's a hero. And now I know he's not. So now I can have a healthy relationship. Like, come on. I wish that it would have ended when he landed and got pulled out of the craft and that was it. Right. Like,
I really needed that final I love the way the final monologue like flips than earlier monologue. Where like earlier in the film, he's like, I'm only going to rely on myself, I'm only going to focus on what's essential. And then at the end of the film, it's a mirror of that earlier monologue, but you know that his idea of what's essential has changed. And yes, the final line where he's like, I will live, I will shoulder other people's burdens or help them shoulder their burdens as they shoulder mine. I will live. Yes, it's super dopey and it's super, super the movie, like laying out its message 100%.
But he also, but Carolyn, he also says, he literally says, I'm looking forward to the day my solitude ends. So we didn't need to see it ending. He already fucking told us in his goddamn over the top exposition.
I need to see it.
Yeah, well,
I needed to see.
That's fine. Okay, well, I want to shift gears though because I think that the way that they show the colonization of Mars, of the moon, is really so important to talk about.
So interesting. I loved it so much.
My biggest fear when we talk about colonizing Mars and all of these corporations who SpaceX and Virgin and all of the fucking there's a bunch of them doing this work. Like that's what's going to happen. It's going to look like New York City. Yeah. Like it's going to look like the Penn Station. It looked like Penn Station.
Yeah.
And the New York City subway.
There's a subway on the moon. On the moon, you can get a $5 footlong. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So coming from the like knowing a lot about the space side of this, and like I actually really enjoyed the fact that the technology they'd obviously looked into. They had a good science advisor in some capacity. I have one really major thing that I leaned over to Anita during the movie and was like, they would never say that, which I'll come back to in a second. But I loved the space antenna scene. That's a thing that they actually want to build. I don't think they want it to be an antenna. I don't know why you would need an antenna that pops out of the atmosphere necessarily.
What is that? Can you say what that is?
There's a thing that they want. So at the very beginning of the film, and it shows up in the trailer as well, which I always hate when the first scene in the movie is also the trailer. It kind of bugs me. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. They want to build a thing called a space elevator, and I mean they like everyone in the space industry. Because right now we use chemical rockets, we burn fuel, and we lift things out of the atmosphere. So essentially they want to build a space elevator. Think of it just like a regular elevator. The top is a satellite and the bottom is anchored to the ground somewhere near the equator. And so this was sort of like that. I, again, don't know why you would want an antenna.
Right, because I thought it was supposed to be a space elevator, but then they called it an antenna, and I was like, wait a second, what is this?
Like the International Space Antenna. And I'm like, but what are you antennaing? Like, we already have the Deep Space Network. All you got to do is listen. Like, that's what an antenna does. So I didn't quite understand it. But I liked the concept, and it was definitely something that is something that people have thought about. And it's the same with some of the rockets, like, they kept calling it the far side of the moon, not the dark side of the moon, which is accurate because it's only dark when it's away from the sun. When the back of the moon is facing the sun, it's light. So they can't call it the dark side of the moon then. Stuff like that was very accurate. But they said he went on a manned mission, and NASA does not use the word manned. Mm-hmm. No space agencies use the word manned. They all say crewed now. Like a crew, because it's gender neutral, and many of the missions are going to be either like mostly female, all female, like mixed all sorts of genders at some point. Like there's no reason to use the word manned, and so it bugged me a little bit because it's not a word that, like, NASA's been very specific lately about that, and people are up in arms about it, of course, because the internet. But I think it makes more sense.
Yeah.
And it stuck out to me like a little sore thumb in this very well-researched kind of science and engineering thing.
Yeah, totally. And I did like that when they did the sweeping wall of all of the previous history of astronauts. They showed Mae Jemison, which was really nice. Much. Yeah, that was really good. I kind of liked this visual that they designed of like deep capitalism in space, right? Where it was like I thought that the scene with the pirates was stupid, but I liked the reason for it, right? Like I liked that they're showing like all of these American corporations that are going into the moon, so you can be a space tourist and go shopping like you would here, at the Glendale Galleria or something. Yeah. But that the other side of capitalism is poverty, is economic and disenfranchised, like all of the stuff that breeds space pirates ultimately. Cool. Like, I don't know where they came from or why that would be like land that you can just like drive onto or whatever, but
that is interesting too. So currently we don't have a lot of space law. There's one treaty, which the name I don't actually have offhand. I'd have to Google it, but they just call it the Outer Space Treaty. But it's like the treaty that governs outer space and the celestial bodies. It essentially governs literally everything that we know of in space because it was signed in the 60s. And it says that you can't own a celestial body. So I thought it was cool that they had that little voiceover, past like the very cool woman who said, reminder, the moon is disputed territory, and there are all these different kind of geopolitical forces weighing on this new land. Like right now, we don't have any new land except for what climate change is exposing. But like in terms of the moon, this is a completely untapped place. And
what did you think of? So one, we're talking about the representation of capitalism, right? Mm-hmm. And ownership of the moon. Right. But also, it's all product placement. These companies all paid to be in, like, the meta level of this is also gross. So, like,
funny.
They flew, they're like, you have to fly commercial to the moon. So they flew Virgin Atlantic.
Which makes no sense, because there's a Virgin Galactic.
Right.
Already.
That was weird.
Why didn't they fly Virgin Galactic to the moon?
And I love that it just looked like the Virgin Atlantic planes.
It was purple. I love that it was purple. R.I.P. Virgin America.
Yeah, that was sad. We miss them.
I don't know if I really do, but like I kind of do.
I do. I use them a lot.
I miss the purple. I just think it was so whimsical.
I miss the screens where you could order things on the screen and not talk to other people. I don't like talking to people.
I did like the capitalistic kind of the little twists on everything, and just the near futureness of it was really well done.
Did it feel like, this question to both of you, did it feel like the movie got weirder as he was getting more unhinged? So all the stuff on Mars, that room with the projected walls, the way that they shot the woman that came in whose parents were killed by his dad, that like the framing of her, the shot of the way she looked, and then the quick jump in movement, like there's a lot of stuff, the hallways, like as we started getting further away from the known, and we're kind of saying the moon is kind of the known here, I guess, in this universe, that it started getting more and more bizarre and weird, and like kind of like the filmmaking became a little more unhinged in some ways to represent his internal. I don't know. That room was weird to me.
The room was weird.
Oh, the comfort rooms, they're called. I wish we'd gotten a better look at them almost, because I was like, oh, I kind of want to lay in a room where it looks like I'm surrounded by I don't know, formations of flying birds or whatever.
I mean, I literally was like, how do we set up rooms like this?
Yeah, I
Because
kinda
I kind of wanted one
Yeah.
too, but it also felt disarming in this way that was like, I wouldn't want to be stuck in this room for 24 hours.
Well,
right?
They
Like
seem to be forcing him to be in this room.
yeah.
Right. I think the filmmaking, I think you're right, Anita. Like the filmmaking, I feel does it becomes more kind of claustrophobic because, I mean, Roy is in this really emotionally charged situation of like, he's sending these messages to his father but he's clearly cut off from, there's the three people in the booth who clearly are not like engaging with him honestly about whether they're getting a response or not. So obviously that's like this tumultuous thing. And I do think the filmmaking changes to kind of convey that to the viewer.
I love that they have a recording booth on Mars, and that because he's in a recording booth, and the soundproofing in that room is like future soundproofing, so it extrudes out of the walls. It was but it also didn't make any sense because he looked up and you could see outside, which would also never be in a recording booth. I'm just saying that whole scene was weird.
Is like an interesting. So there are things called anechoic chambers, which are like really silent rooms, and that's what they look like. Is this? They use them for all sorts of stuff, like not usually, I would imagine, recording messages.
More like torture.
Well, actually, yeah. If you sit in one of the quietest rooms in the world, like for long enough, it can really make you go a little nuts because you can't even hear. You can hear your own body's like body movements and sounds and like digestive system and stuff because there's no sound. It's really creepy and weird. But I liked that, except, and I kept trying to justify it, and like my science brain was like, oh well, they probably need a really quiet environment because the way because it was like for a laser communication.
Oh, I was going to
system.
ask you that. It was like laser transmissions. I was like, is that real?
I don't know. Probably. Like you could just flash a laser. You could do Morse code by laser. Like I assume you could do binary. It would still travel the speed of light. It doesn't matter what you're sending. So you can send any signal. It's not going to get to Neptune faster, which I looked up, and it's something like 4 or so hours. So to round trip a message, you'd have to wait a day. So
all right, so it wasn't super super long,
right?
Yeah,
because from Mars to Neptune it would be like 4 light hours or something like that. I might have the exact number wrong, but it's like within a day.
He was in the booth and he recorded a thing, and then it kind of made it look like they were sitting around waiting.
Yeah,
and you're like, but it wouldn't get there. Why are you standing here still?
Right, it's not gonna like it's not a walkie-talkie, man. Like,
I felt like when he sneaks onto the ship, and one kills everybody, which was disconcerting. And also, why would you shoot a weapon on a ship? I don't know. That seemed weird to me.
Also, why would you sneak on a ship through the engines when they're about to take off and have to climb a ladder past the engine? This just seems like a bad idea all around.
But as much as I was like, as much as I don't particularly like the film, I think I was still invested in what was going to happen. Because when he's like 79 days alone, my heart sunk.
I was just like, oh.
I think we both audibly groaned.
Yeah.
Like, how do you survive that? And then
he's like, I'm going to turn everything off. Just hang out.
alone. You walked out when he injected the feeding tube.
Oh, no, I watched that.
Oh, did you see that?
I didn't like it. I don't like that kind of stuff. Medicine in space freaks me out.
Yeah, it's awkward.
It's really weird.
Carolyn, do you think you could spend 79 days alone?
I mean... yes,
I couldn't. That sounds like madness.
I could, but I know also that it would take quite a toll on me. I guess as a little footnote too to this conversation, I just want to say, this week I saw another movie about a white guy with intense daddy issues.
Star Wars?
Any Mark Wahlberg movie?
Right. No, the Joker.
You saw it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I just have to say that, like, so that's, daddy issues, without getting into specifics, play like a really big part in that film as well. And
I'm shocked.
There's been so much discourse around Joker, and not unearned. And, it's definitely a film about a figure who goes down a destructive path, right? And I guess, in the context of that viewing experience as well, there's something sort of like refreshing or like encouraging about this film in the sense that as earnest as it may be, as corny as maybe we find it or whatever, that is like, that advocates so explicitly for like, oh no, get in touch with your emotions, connect with other people. I don't know, like, it's just interesting that it's sort of like there's a little bit of it's like an opposing kind of philosophical thrust almost, or at least exploration. Like the two films have similar elements and obviously are both working again on kind of like a mythic level, but they go down such different roads with it. And I'm like, well, of the two, I certainly prefer what Ad Astra is saying about men and people and like connection and all that good stuff.
Yeah. No man is an island. What? But women are.
Oh, shoot. Yeah.
What?
Especially when their parents are killed and she doesn't care about anything after that.
Exactly. I don't know what we just said, but that's fine. Let's take a quick break.
Hey, Feminist Frequency Radio listeners, why not join our Patreon community at patreon.com/femfreak? Seriously, what are you waiting for?
I don't like their clear phones, by the way. Does anyone want a clear phone so everyone can see what you're looking at on your phone at all times? Nobody wants that.
Were there clear phones?
Yeah, there were clear tablets, clear phones, clear all the gadgets you could see through the back of.
What I didn't like, you didn't like the clear phones. What I didn't like was that they do, so he sticks the thing on his neck and he does the psych evaluations out loud in front of other people.
Yeah.
It was a very public thing that was happening here. And maybe that's just like space is public and you can't be alone
not
ever.
a lot of privacy.
But like, man, and also is it an AI?
I wondered that
That
too.
is like an AI therapist that's like, you're fine now because you admitted the truth. Right? Or is there someone listening on the other end?
I totally thought it was an AI. I kind of liked some of those little technological things, though. Like, who needs AirPods? Because he had it near his ear, and it was his headphones and his, like,
I don't know if
hear
that's
him
true. Because he had earpods in later. So I think that he was just listening to his phone or whatever device it is on the table, and someone walked in and it stopped. I don't think he was listening with that. His space phone.
His future space phone. Yeah.
All right. Enough of that nonsense. Let's do some freaking out. What's your freak out? Now it's time to talk about what's been thrilling us, moving us, upsetting us, or infuriating us this past week. Carolyn?
My freak out this week is it's another film. The other day, sort of on a whim, I went into a movie not knowing much about it other than that it was a gay film called End of the Century. And so End of the Century is an Argentinian film, or the filmmaker, the writer-director is Argentinian, but the film takes place in Barcelona, and it's about this poet, this man named Ocho, who is in his late 30s or early 40s, and he hooks up with this guy named Javi. They have a pleasant little dinner together a bit later, and they're talking. And Ocho is like, I feel like I've met you before. And Javi's like, oh, no, we have met before. And so then we learn through this kind of remarkable flashback that these two characters met once before. And it's a really lovely gay romance film. I mean, it's difficult. I'm having a hard time talking about it because I don't know, because it's hard to articulate in a short span of time what makes it affecting and effective. But the film does something that like explores that way that sometimes we, or at least some of us, are like haunted by the thought of lives that we didn't lead, or like, what if I'd gone down this path instead of that path? What if I'd done this instead of that? It's just and it's just such a beautiful film. Like the way Barcelona is used as a setting, as a backdrop, is lovely. It's to its credit, like the sex in it is more like explicit and honest than say the sex in say Call Me by Your Name, which was, as much as I love that film, was rightly criticized, I think, by some people for like, oh, it can show straight sex very openly, but once as soon as it's like Elio and Oliver, it's like, oh, let's pan up to the trees or whatever. Like, this is not a film that does that. Thankfully, but it's just a really well acted, very honest, kind of wise, very poignant film.
Cool.
Definitely the best. The best. Not that I've seen too many queer films this year, but it's probably the best queer film that I've seen this year. So look for it at your local art house theater. End of the century.
Awesome, Trace. What are you having feelings about?
What am I having feelings about? I don't know. This week I've mostly been working on stuff.
Do you have feelings about work?
I always have feelings about work. I think the thing I've been freaking out the most about is getting things right. Because I make science videos and there's a lot of opportunities to get things wrong. And the thing that I have kind of come to realize more recently is that mistakes are going to happen. It's how you kind of deal with them, right? Which I'm kind of extrapolating out from just science videos. But I was really worried about this latest video that I made about cool sculpting because I had written the whole video and I'd shot everything in a place where I wasn't going to get a chance to shoot there again. And then I got home and I was reading through my script again and I realized that I'd made a pretty big mistake, and that was to cite a paper that was funded by the company that sells the product based like cool sculpting. So I was like, well, now I have to cut out this whole paper, this whole section of the video, and figure out how to cover it up. And I was happy that I caught it, but if I hadn't, I started to think about what I would have had to do to kind of fix it. It's like a constant fear I have making videos about science is, since I'm not a scientist, is I don't want to mess things up and make myself look silly. But at the same time, you can only do so much as one person.
Yeah, and I think that if you didn't care, that would be a bigger problem.
Yeah,
I mean, less for you,
true. Yeah,
but generally speaking.
There are people who make videos that are like fact-based videos that I care a lot less. So I'm glad that there are more of us out there that care about being correct.
Yeah, totally. I wasted all my freakouts last time we recorded. I think I had 2 in one episode and then 1 in the bonus, and Ebony rightfully scolded me for wasting all my freakouts. They weren't very good, though. I think this week I'm going to freak out about the Great British Bake Off. Because
I love it so much.
It's so good. It's people baking in really cute environment. In a cute environment. I don't even know what to say about it. It's just so cute. They're in a tent. They've got these great little kitchens. They've got the oven door that folds into the bottom of the oven, so it's not in your way. You don't have to lean over it. Anyways, they're so sweet. And they all try to help each other out, even though they're competing. And it's so British and delightful. Yeah. And they had a dairy week, which they've never had before. And it's
we've been watching it on Netflix. There's it's releasing week over week, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
Because usually I would binge it. I actually kind of love seeing it as more of a show.
Yeah, it's been a long...
That's different.
We don't have as much time. We don't have as much programming that we watch week to week.
Yeah.
And it is such a different experience. I think there are very few... there's some shows that I do that with, but it's very rare these days because, usually Netflix really changed the face of how we take in media now. So...
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, that's it. If you want to submit your own freak out, you can do that at feministfrequency.com/freakout. That's FREQOUT. Thank you so much for listening to Feminist Frequency Radio. Stay tuned for the Freakin' After Party, which is only available to backers of this podcast. You can learn more at patreon.com/femfreak. Trace Dominguez,
Hi.
thank you so much for being on with
thank
us.
you.
Will you join us for the bonus?
Yes.
Great. If people want to watch your amazing science videos, where might they do that?
If you just Google Trace Dominguez, that's Dominguez, you'll find all my social medias, and you can also just go to youtube.com/Trace Dominguez.
Excellent. And you can find us everywhere great podcasts are found. If you haven't yet, go to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review us, preferably with the higher amount of stars than the lower amount of stars. But, you do you. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and all the social medias at FemFreak. This show is engineered by Rob Pera. Sarah Norales provides technical support, artwork by Jamie Varon, and our intro music is by Phil Circus. Join us next week for another feminist dive into popular culture. Thanks for listening.
Later.
Bye.
Bye.